This is Friday, July 13th. We're in the middle of chapter 26, which is amino acids and proteins. Also today is test 3 that's due. So make sure you download that and take it today and get that uploaded. It's over chapters 23 through 25. It leaves off with the amines. So it does the enols, the enolates, and then the amines. So 26 is not in test 3 here. And then homework 11, which corresponds to 26, is also due, next Monday. And then Monday we'll also start carbohydrates, the next big section of our biomolecules coming up. So let's go over here to the other board here and have a little review of the stuff we did last time. And here's your challenge. Name this molecule, that one, and that one. So I'm giving you the structures. And then draw W, Y, and D. So there's your challenge there if you want to work on that. All right, now I'll give you the answers. So you're also asked to, if this is a D or an L amino acid, remember we talked about that? The L's have the S stereochemistry, the D's have the R stereochemistry, and essential versus non-essential. So a couple different things here. So what molecule is that? Yeah, it's phenylalanine. So F would be the single name there, and is it D or L? Well, the stereochemistry is such that you've got the hydrogen in the front. What's the top priority? Nitrogen, right? And then this carbon over here with the 3 bonds to oxygen. And this one here. So that is indeed what? S. Yeah. And so if this is kinked down in the zigzag drawing, the stereocenter right here, if it's downward and it's down here, the dashed line, the stereocenter is S. So that's the way to keep track of it. Is phenylalanine one of the essential or non-essential amino acids? Remember, it's the whole food ladder, must have various key ingredients. So yeah, food ladder, there it is right there. And what molecule is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 carbons. What would you call that? Well, it's not glutamic acid. That would have the carboxylic acid here. It's amine. So it's glutamine, right? And it's Q for that. Now this one, sorry, I didn't draw that very well. We've got this bold here. So that stereocenter is R. Okay. So this is an D amino acid. This is an L amino acid over here being S. So this is a D. What about this one? Yeah, this is the cyclic one. This is proline, P. And this is kinked down here, and this is dashed down. So that's indeed the L form. And the stereocenter there is S. Whole food ladder must have various key ingredients. P is not one of them. It's not one of the essential ones. You can make that in the body. Same with Q. You can make that also. And this one here with the sulfur, sulfhydryl group. And the methylene kinked downward there, so indeed it is L. S let's see, stereocenter. We need to look at that. Let's see, hydrogen's coming out. What's the top priority here? Well, it is nitrogen number 1, but what about this carbon versus that carbon? This carbon has a sulfur on it, so this one gets top priority in 3 there, so this is 1, 2, 3. So this is indeed an R stereocenter, but it's still L. It's kinked downward there. Remember we said that's the only one that does not have an S stereocenter in the L series. So it's indeed the R stereocenter there. And it's cysteine. Whole food ladder must have various key ingredients. And again, that's not an essential one there. So non-essential, non-essential. The only essential one is this one here. All right, draw W. So what is W? We need to remind you of that, I guess. So, and at pH 7, so that's the thing here, the ionization of the alpha amino and the carboxylate are charged there. And then we have the stereocenter L right there. And then we have what? The nitrogen here and the 5-member ring and then the benzene on it there. That is the tryptophan indole right there. And so that would be the whole molecule right there. The L tryptophan for W, and then the charges there. Okay, what's Y? Tyrosine, right? And so start out the same way. You can always just draw a glycine to get started there. And yeah, yeah, we're at pH 7, so that would be it. And then what? The benzene, and then the para-OH group. So yeah, that would be a tyrosine, phenol version of phenylalanine. And what's D? Aspartic acid. And we need to do the charge here, lysine part, and then we need what? 1, 2, 3, 4 carbons, and then another carboxylic acid, but it's ionized at pH 7, right? So the overall charge of this would be -1 at pH 7. Yeah, so you could review charges too for that. So the structures of the amino acids and things like that, the naming, you should be comfortable with right now. What I'd like to talk about now is synthesis of amino acids. So let's look at how we can make the simple amino acids. So let's look at the malonate approach first. We can take methylmalonate. Remember from the malonic acid synthesis, it's that same diester. And we can convert that to the conjugate base, deprotonate with sodium methoxide, and then trap with NBS. And what's NBS? N-bromosuccinimide. That's the electrophilic form of bromine. Okay? And what? We can then take that bromide and displace it with the sodium salt of acetamide. So we have the nitrogen with an acetate on it. So yeah, what's this reagent look like? Well, it's the sodium salt of this. So that's the blown up thing of it. So what do we get here? We get the bromide forming, and then we have the displacement on the bromide, and we get the nitrogen now at that middle position. So initially I had a bromide on there from the NBS trapping in the enolate, and then we use the sodium salt of acetamide to displace it there. And that's what? An SN2 type reaction. So we're almost there. What we need to do is deprotonate again. You can see we still have a hydrogen there in between, so we can take that off. And then we can put on any R group here, any R X with a halide. So the R's correspond to the amino acids we want to make. So let's make this one with benzyl bromide right now. So if our R group here is the benzyl group, what are we going to put on? We're going to get this intermediate. We're going to have the acetamide, and we're going to have the benzyl group. Okay. And now what? We can hydrolyze the carboxylic acids here and also heat it. So what's going to happen now? We're going to go to the acids here and here, and we're going to hydrolyze the amide here also. So this might take a little while. Okay, heating there has to go on. And then what? We're going to decarboxylate. We're going to lose CO2. Remember? Malonic acid and the acetoacetate. We can take those off, and then what do we get? We get the acid. So here I'm drawing the protonated form of the amine right there, the NH3 group protonated. And I'm also showing the carboxylic acid protonated. Why? Because we're under acidic conditions. If we adjust the pH to 7, what do we get? We get then phenylalanine. And notice it's in the racemic form, so we would say plus minus for both the D and the L, the R and the S being there for that version. We'll show you an enantioselective version of that in a second. Let's see, the next one I'd like to show is the whole Volhard-Zielinski reaction. Volhard-Zielinski. Yeah, some guy was really named Hell. Okay, he was an organic chemist after all, so I guess the name fits there. And no, that's not Wayne Zielinski from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Okay, this is a different Zielinski. And we're going to do the reaction here with a carboxylic acid, and we're going to treat it with bromine and phosphorus tribromide. This is called the Helmholtz-Zielinski reaction. You work it up with water. I'm not going to expect you to know the mechanism, but it does go through an enol form of the carboxylic acid. And bromines are electrophile, and that's where we'll get a bromide on there, and the product will look like this. Okay. Yeah, I'm not going to hold you to the mechanism there, don't worry about that. But it puts a bromide at the alpha position, so just know the reactivity of that, I think. And then the next thing is to treat with excess ammonia. Okay? So we've seen this reaction before. It's another what? SN2 type reaction. Here's our nucleophile. We have excess of it. And what do we go to? We go to the amine. And in this case, I'm going to draw the carboxylate version there. If we adjust the pH to 7, though, if we add a little bit of dilute acid at the end here, we can get our regular amino acid. Which amino acid is that? Let's see, it's got a methyl group there at the alpha position. So which one is that? Yeah, it's alanine. Okay. So the Helmholtz-Zielinski reaction, you could start with any R group here. Right now we just have the methyl group here on propanoic acid. But you can start with other carboxylic acids and get the racemic form of that from that directly. All right, let's do the Strecker reaction now. This one also combines some reactions we've already seen before. Strecker is kind of a neat mechanism, and we can look at parts of that. Let's make the same thing. Let's make alanine here. Treat with sodium cyanide and ammonium chloride. Now, ammonium chloride is the salt form of ammonia. It's in equilibrium depending on what you got there, but you can form some free ammonia to get things started here for this reaction. That step gives you the cyanoamine, and that's completely analogous to the cyanohydrin reaction we saw before, adding cyanide to alcohols under acidic conditions. We protonated that, but here it goes to the amino cyanide. And then if we treat this with acid and water, you see, and heat, and then adjust the pH to 7 here, we can also get what? The carboxylate and the ammonium and what? This methyl group is still there. So again, what amino acid is still alanine again, okay? The racemic form there. So how does this go? Well, let's see. Ammonia with what? A aldehyde. That's going to go to the aminium line, right? We saw that before in our earlier chapter. And then the cyanide's in there, right? So the cyano group can add here. So yeah, you can see how we go to that. So that's not mysterious, that mechanism there. And then the hydrolysis of the cyanide under acidic condition, that's just a derivative of carboxylic acid that can be hydrolyzed and get to the Strecker product. Okay, so those 4 approaches there, the malonic alkylation approach, the Helmholtz-Zielinski, which puts in the alpha bromide, lets you do an SN2. There you have to start with the R group there. Same thing here. Notice here we're adding the cyanide, so we start with that, and that becomes the carboxylic acid. So they kind of have different components to that. But reactivity is just a review of reactions we've seen before. So keeping those straight should be okay. Let's go up to the overhead now, if we can get that focused up there. And yeah, you guys have all these graphics. If you can't see these quite clear enough, make sure you open up the graphics on Learning Suite and take a look at them. But here's what we've just been talking about. Helmholtz-Zielinski and the Strecker and the malonate reaction there. Yeah, so those are the ones there. I'll give you a little bit more details on the board there. Here's the asymmetric version, and I like to show this example because it ties into an important disease, of course, Parkinson's disease. And you probably know some important people who've had that condition. In fact, you probably have grandparents or relatives. So Michael J. Fox, the actor, who's this guy? That's the champ, Muhammad Ali. He probably developed Parkinson's due to repeated brain trauma from boxing, right? He was a boxer. And then Billy Graham, the evangelist. And this topic's been in movies. Here we have Robert De Niro and Robin Williams in the movie Awakening. which actually follows very closely the science of the development of this drug called L-DOPA to treat Parkinson's disease. If it's untreated, this part of the brain actually dies, the substantia nigra, and that's where a lot of dopamine in the brain is produced. Dopamine is the important neurotransmitter that controls muscle control, so balance and cognition. And if it progresses without treatment, the people actually freeze up and become catatonic. If dopamine is administered directly in the brain, the problem is it's a short-acting neurotransmitter. It just dissipates very quickly, and it's hard to deliver drugs to the brain because of the blood-brain barrier issue that maybe you've heard about. But this is the precursor to it. It's called L-DOPA, L because it is the S hysteria center right there. It's a catecholamine. It has the 2 hydroxyl groups that become dopamine here. So how do you go from L-DOPA to dopamine, the actual neurotransmitter that alleviates the Parkinson's symptoms? Yeah, you got to decarboxylate, take off the carboxylic acid. And that's pretty well known how that works. But that part of the brain is dead, and so it's an issue there. So the dopamine can be administered and alleviate that. The enzyme is still there that can convert to dopamine. But how do you get this in the L form? Well, you have to do an asymmetric hydrogenation of this alkene. So here's hydrogen. If we can put the 2 hydrogens across this double bond, enantioselectively, selectively, we need the S form. Okay? And it's with a rhodium catalyst in L2 right here. It's a chiral bisphosphine. So the catalyst is chiral. It creates 2 diastereomeric transition states, one of higher energy going to the R, and the one that's at lower energy goes to the S, an antimeric form. 95% EE is a typical reaction. You can recrystallize that and acidify to get the acid-amide off here and get the acetates off. These are esters, right? And those conditions give the drug directly there. So the asymmetric version here, it's another way to make amino acids, but this is chiral and antimeric pure form. Most of the commercially available enantiopure amino acids now are made using asymmetric hydrogenation reactions, which is kind of cool, I think. All right, let's get into putting these guys together. So here's the key idea, right? We know the amino acids, there's 20 of them. I'm showing a few of them here, your favorites, right? And then peptides and proteins are just polyamides where we link them together. Okay, so here's an amide between this amino acid, which is alanine, and this one right here, which is phenylalanine, and this one here, which is lysine, and this one here, which is glycine. So you see the polyamides going down the chain. And why did nature select that? Well, that's the most stable form of a carboxylic acid derivative, the amide construction there. So before we get into this and give a little background, let's go to the board again here and look at some structures and some things we need to know. So how do we build up these peptides, these polyamino acids? Now, I've been using that term peptide and protein. Peptide refers to a polyamino acid that has anywhere from 2 to 50 amino acids stuck together in a linear chain. A protein has more than that, and it has some function as an enzyme or a fiber in the body. So when we get to proteins, we're talking about hundreds or even thousands of amino acids stuck together. Peptides can be dimers with just 2, or 5 or 10 or whatever, and up to about 50 where we have insulin. And I'll show you a lot of examples of those here in a second. But let's look at the first one here. Gly. And that's how I write a peptide, right? And it's important to orient yourself here. Here's the N terminus, and here's the C terminus. Now, for glycine, it doesn't matter which is on which end, but it will when we get to more complicated ones, right? So we keep that orientation there. And so what does this mean? Well, draw the 2 glycines, and I'll draw them in just neutral form right now. And we've got, orientation here, which isn't important. And notice I've got the carboxylate here on the right, okay, the CN, and I've got the nitrogen end, the N terminus here on the left. And that's the orientation we always use. Oh, there's 2 there. Okay. So how do we get to gly? Well, we've got to eliminate the elements of water. Okay. So where are they? Right here. Okay. H2O. If we can eliminate that and put this nitrogen on the acyl group, we can form that amide bond. So what will it look like? Look like this. And yeah, so we just made that bond right there. And notice it's glycine, glycine, okay? N-terminus here on the left, C-terminus on the right. So that should be pretty straightforward. What about this one? FF. Phenylalanine, phenylalanine. Well, same thing, only there we've got what? We've got the methylene and the benzene there. And, you know, keep track of your stereochemistries here. If this is keep downward in the zigzag, it's the dash, okay, to make it what S. And if it's up here, it's always bold. So that's still the S. And double check that. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, it's still S for the stereocenter. Okay. And so what does Phi look like now? The phenylalanine, phenylalanine. Well, it's just like that. You can always start with the polyglycine and then link together all the other amino acids you need here. And so there you go. That's what Phi would look like. All right, let's do a more complicated one. How about this? Let's do A, P, N. So what amino acids are we talking about? Alanine, proline, and what's this one right here? Asparagine. Okay, and that's the amide side chain group. And now the C and the N-terminus are very important. Okay, if you want to give that a try on your own, see if you can draw that tripeptide. We're going to have 2 amide bonds connecting right here and here, right? We got the right side chains on that. Okay, let me show you how I approach this. So we've got 3 there. And let's draw this at pH 7. Let's up the ante a little bit. We know how to ionize these side chains and keep track of things. So let's adjust the pH. And let's start here with 3 glycines stuck together. And that's how you can always draw these peptides. So there's 3, here's our 2 amide bonds. If this is alanine, what do we need right here? Yeah, we need a methyl down. Okay, so you see alanines on the N-terminus position. Okay, and then what about right here? Well, we need proline. So P, proline has the 5-membered ring there. We need to get rid of that nitrogen. Why? Because proline has the ring there, right? 3 bonds to nitrogen, the lone pair in resonance. And it's okay to draw proline like that. It's kind of kinked around, whatever. But that stereocenter being up right there, yeah, that's still S. That's S right there. And then what's this? This is asparagine. So we need the amide bond right there. And let's see, are we correct for our pH? Yeah. This is a neutral polar side chain, so it's not basic, that lone pair is in resonance. This one will be deprotonated. You're on the basic side of that pK, which is 2.2, and this pK is about 9.8, whatever. And you're on the acidic side when you're pH 7 of that. So overall, APN here would have that structure. Pay attention to the stereochemistry and the ionization. We have neutral side chains on all these. So our overall charge at pH 7 is 0. So that's a good approach to do it. Let's try a little bit more complicated one. Okay? So we did a dimer and a trimer. How about this one? LDAGH. Okay? You can use the 1-letter code, the alphabet, spell all sorts of crazy words. I knew a biochemist when I gave a talk and reported a new protein where there's thousands of amino acids in there. He'd report how many times Elvis would show up. Elvis, the name of the rock guy, corresponds to each one of those amino acids. And he had one protein called Titan, where Elvis showed up 7 times actually in the sequence. But now here we're doing LDAGH. And what we can do is just start with glycine. And why do I say start with glycine? Because it doesn't have anything in side chains. We can adjust that later. You see, we just go down the chain here and see how many we're going to need. Yeah, it's quite a few this time, isn't it? I think we got it there. Okay. We need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, we got them all there. That would just be 5 G's in a row. But now let's just adjust it, right? L stands for what? Lysine? No, it stands for leucine, remember. And leucine has the isobutyl side chain. And this is the downward kink, so we need this pointed down there. This is called the zigzag backbone. That's just one conformation. You can rotate around a lot of these bonds here within peptides. Not this one, we'll see. The amide bond doesn't easily rotate. Really stay like this, but you can rotate around these bonds here and get different conformations. To keep track of these, it's good to just draw them out straight that way. And then we got D, aspartic acid, right? That is 1, 2, 3, 4, and it will be ionized pH 7. Then we have A here, that's what? Alanine, so we added a methyl group there. G, glycine, right? And then H for histidine. In histidine, we've got to draw the imidazole group, right? The imidazole looks like that. It's got 2 nitrogens in the 5-membered ring, right? And it can be protonated right here. Remember the pKa of this? Right here, if that's protonated, that will be a plus charge. That pKa is 6.1, okay? So let's play around here a little bit. Let's look at the structure at pH 7. What would be the overall charge? Well, this one would be protonated. This one would be deprotonated. These are neutral. What about this one? If we're at pH 7, we're on the what? The basic side of that pKa. So that would be deprotonated and neutral. So at pH 7, what's our overall charge? -1, -2, -1, right? Yeah, -1. How about if we were at pH 2? What would be the overall charge? Well, that would still be protonated. Remember, that's super acidic, right? That would be acidic enough to be protonated. That pKa is 3.8 for aspartic acid. And yeah, if we're at pH 2, this will be protonated also. And what about that? Yeah, that would be protonated. Okay. So it would be our overall charge here at pH 2 would be +1 +2, right? Okay, yeah, +2. And how about pH 12? Let's do a super basic one now. Let's see, if that pK is 9, that will be what? Deprotonated, so you'll have 2 H's there. This one's certainly deprotonated, way up there, basic one. What about this one? Yeah, we're way on the basic side of that, so that'll be deprotonated and neutral. And what about that one? Wow. So that will be negative also. So these are neutral when they're deprotonated, right? We don't mess with the amides. Okay, those pKa's are around 20 or so. Okay, why? Because the lone pair resonance here, and it takes a much stronger base to deprotonate that. Okay, it's a neutral amide there. In fact, the first thing to come off would be over here. The pKa here is about 22, so if you use super strong base. But pH, we're only from 0 to 14, so we only worry about that. So what's our overall charge here? -1, -1, so it'll be -2, I think. Yeah, that should be correct for LDAGH. Should be able to draw those structures and keep track of those, okay? Let's go back to the overhead up here. If you can follow me there. Sorry to keep you running around here. Okay. Let's look at the basic structure again of a protein or a peptide. The nice thing, they're the same structures. You know, this is just part of a bigger chain, you could say. You should be able to pick out all these amino acids you see that are in that chain. Let's look at some others. So, well, let's look at the main event, the amide bond, right? Or the peptide bond, as Linus Pauling called it. He proposed the correct structure of the alpha helix that we'll look at in a second. And he said they were polyamides. And so when you have an amide bond here, you've got the lone pair that can resonate, shortening this carbon-nitrogen bond, right? But you can still rotate around these bonds here and here, okay? So free rotation there, but not here. Normally no rotation. Because if we rotate around an amide bond, we break that lone pair resonance into the carbonyl, right? So usually keep these two carbons here in a pseudo-trans conformation, okay? It's about 25 kcals per mole to break that amide bond resonance and rotate around there. There are some cis amide bonds in nature. Most of those in proteins, though, are in these S-trans amide conformations. So here's glycine, and there's the important resonance there, glycine, which we just looked at there. And here's the different positions there. And what they're pointing out here with these 6 red arrows is the fact that all 6 atoms around the amide bond are all in a plane. These 2 carbons, that oxygen, the nitrogen, the hydrogen there, and that carbon, all the atoms involved in the amide bond are all planar. Why are they planar? Because of the resonance delocalization there, the amide bond. And if you tip this gly on the side there, you can see that planar arrangement around the amide bond. Okay, let's look at peptides in general. Like I said, they're dimers up to 50 mers or so. Here's one maybe you've heard of, enkephalin, which are pentapeptides in the brain. These are endogenous pain inhibitors. These endorphins or enkephalins are released upon acute pain and chronic pain. They hit the same receptors as morphine and heroin. They hit the opioid receptors. In fact, conformationally, the enkephalins, and here they are, YGGFM and YGGFL, they have the same conformation, the same shape as morphine and heroin. They mimic it, we say, which is kind of an amazing thing. The enkephalins are only available in the brain for minutes, though. They dissipate quite quickly, whereas the morphine drugs can persist for hours there. Different bioavailability. Then we have the conotoxins, these cone snail peptides, which are ion channel inhibitors. They'll induce heart attacks, heart disease, and stroke. These are very dangerous things. And what you see here is cysteine-cysteine disulfide linkages. We'll have to talk about that later. Their little shapes there bind to those receptors. We've got substance P, which controls pain. It's a neuropeptide. We've got glucagon, which is a very important hormone. It's at 28 mer. There's 28 amino acids there, and that you can see them all in all their glory. And it's important. Histidines on the N terminus here, and threonine is on the C terminus there. They control different things for metabolism. Glucagon signals the body that blood glucose is at low, or it's gone, and it's inhibited that way. Oxytocin, vasopressin, maybe you've heard of that as the feel-good hormone. It's also known to induce what? Labor in pregnant ladies. And this is produced endogenously in the brain when labor is ready to start, or you can induce labor. And those of you who have kids, maybe you've heard about this or seen this about friends that have delivered after they've received a shot of oxytocin. It works very quickly. And it's also got a cysteine-cysteine disulfide link, and then these amino acids down the chain. It's also got a post-translational modification. The C terminus is a C-amide, a polar non-ionized group. The N terminus here is a cysteine, which is linked around to the 6th position amino acid as a disulfide. There's the structure of it. See the whole thing? There's the N terminus in blue. There's the disulfide. And here's the C terminus where the glycine is. It's now an amide. And then a bunch of other guys here, right? There's proline in there, tyrosine, glutamine, asparagine. You can see some of your favorites there. Okay. Bradykinin, and don't memorize any of these, okay? I'm just showing you examples. And you see, they're relatively short. These are not enzymes. These are not proteins. They're small molecules that usually have an effect that dissipates quite quickly. They're enzymes in the body called proteases that begin to hydrolyze these amide bonds, and then they lose their activity. Here's bradykinin, a very well-known blood vessel dilator. It only lasts for a few minutes in the body. If you want a drug to dilate blood vessels, to treat hypertension or heart disease, heart failure, you use these kind of drugs that mimic the effect of these peptides. So a lot of drug design here, you see this is not a peptide now. There's one amide bond there between that proline and this lysine, the side chain. But that's an unusual amino acid there and terminating there. So this is the drug designed by Merck here to mimic the effect of bradykinin. Okay, the reactions we're going to need to do here to put these together. So the next section is how do we make peptide bonds? And we'll start with that. We'll show you the chemical synthesis then of peptides. We'll leave the biochemical synthesis of peptides later. That's called translation on the ribosome. We'll show you that later. How cells, living things, put together peptide bonds to make proteins. But now we're going to show you the synthesis of simple peptides. And we've got to do a couple things here. We've got to look at some protecting groups. We'll see this protecting group here called BOC or TBOC. We'll use our old friend DCC here to make the amide bonds here. And then there's a dimer put together. On the C terminus side, we always have an ester, either a methyl ester or a benzyl ester, or we link it to a solid support. So we'll synthesize this from the C terminal side on the right toward the N terminus on the left. And then we can make any size of peptide we want. In the lab, we can make up to 50 mers. Beyond that, the yields are kind of low. But let's look at the basics of what we need to know here on the synthesis for that. So we need these protecting groups. So coming over to the sideboard again. Thank you. You're getting good at following me around. Okay. Why do we need the protecting groups? Well, if we just use the unprotected amino acids with DCC, we would polymerize it. And we wouldn't get selective amide bond formation right where we need to. So we need to do a little bit of protecting groups. The C terminus side is always as an ester, methyl ester, or a benzyl ester. And that's nice because it just comes off with hydroxide. So here's the off part, okay? And it just goes on with regular Fischer esterification in methanol and acid with the free carboxylic acid, or with benzyl alcohol, and then taking off with hydroxide. With a benzyl ester, you can take that off with hydrogen and palladium, which is kind of nice, because we'll have some of the side chains protected as benzyl esters, or CBZ groups, which are also labile to hydrogen and palladium. The nitrogen side has to come on and off all the time. This is the alpha nitrogen, okay? And we're going to take that and react that. So we've got the terminal nitrogen here of an amino acid on the left side, okay? So the squiggle means the rest of the molecule, right? Hopefully you've seen these squiggles before. We're going to put that on with this BOC anhydride, it's called. So carbonyls and tert-butyl oxy groups there, and there's some hydroxide in there. And that puts on the BOC protecting group. TBOC, as it's sometimes called, and TBOC stands for tert-butyl benzyl oxycarbonyl. Don't worry about writing out the whole name of that. It's in your book, whatever. But you see, it's now an amide bond. Well, it's actually a urethane or a urea or a carbamate, sorry, functional group. So that's a different type of functional group, this carbamate. And you take that off with dilute acid, so either HCl, which is dilute, we'll take that off and form the group there. You can adjust the pH back to the neutral amine if you add a little bit of dilute base. You can go back to the neutral amine for the coupling there. But this will have to come off each time, okay? This will be step 2 when we do our coupling, okay? And you'll see how that works here in a second. And then, let's see, the side chains. Side chains, we're going to have arginine and lysine, K here. And those are going to be protected as CBZ groups. And here's our nitrogen that was the side chain group. And again, this is a benzyl oxycarbonyl, or a CBZ group. And this comes off with hydrogen and palladium. And we'll do that at the end, okay? So we can do that globally at the end when we take off a benzyl ester up here, if we use hydrogen and palladium, okay? So the CBZ, we say, is orthogonal to the TBOC, which comes off with dilute acid. The CBZ comes off with hydrogen and palladium. The CBZ will stay on there under the hydrogen chloride conditions. The tert-butyl group forming a tert-butyl cation is actually the key here. You protonate the carbonyl here, and then you can eliminate CO2 and protonate the amine, and then the tert-butyl cation eventually is trapped with water. The benzyl cation is not as stable, and so that will be stable to the dilute conditions here. So we use the hydrogen and palladium to protect the side chains there. The other side chains here, well, arginine and lysine are nitrogen side chains, right? The basic side chains. We also have serine, aspartic acid, glutamic acid, tyrosine, and threonine. These are the two alcohols. Well, tyrosine is also an alcohol, phenol, right? Aspartic acid, glutamic acid have the carboxylates in the side chain. Okay? So we have those protected actually as benzyl ethers. These benzyl ethers, serine, that's a primary alcohol, threonine is a secondary alcohol. Aspartic acid, glutamic acid, you see those would be benzyl esters, and also benzyl ether on tyrosine. Those also come off with the hydrogen and palladium, right? And that's only at the end when you take off the side chain protected groups also. So, yeah, I don't know. Normally I don't worry about the side chains for you. And then the couplings to form the amides will be done with DCC, carbodiamide. So those are all the reactions you need to be aware of for the synthesis. So let's show you the synthesis here of a simple one. And in a homework assignment, you'll see some of the more complex ones. Well, we'll show you some more complex ones on the overhead too here in a second. So let's see, let's make glycol. Okay, let's start very simple. And what you need to start with is amino acid, glycine, which already has a methyl ester on it. And you make that from glycine, right, with methanol and acid. Methanol, HCl, whatever. We'll put that on there. This will initially be protonated, and then you adjust the pH to give the neutral amine there. And then we're going to react that with Bach-protected glycine, which has the free carboxylic acid here. So this will be the C-terminus end here. This will become the N-terminus here. And we're going to react it with DCC, which is dicyclohexylcarbodiamide. Here we have the free carboxylic acid on our second amino acid, which is the one to the left. Okay, we're starting here and synthesizing in this direction. Here's our one position of glycine, which is methyl protected. This one is CBZ protected. So what are we going to get after DCC coupling here? We're going to get the amide bond. We're going to get the methyl ester of glycine here on the C-terminus side. Amide bond's fine there, and what? We have Bach, or T-Bach, sometimes it's called. Terbutyl benzyl oxycarbonyl, protecting it. Now why are we doing that? Because we want the reactivity right here. Okay? If we just use the free, unprotected glycine, with unprotected glycine here, we'd start to polymerize the thing. It'd be a mess. Okay? We want to just get GG. Okay? So to get GG, what do we need to do? We need to take off the T-Bach group, and we can do that with just some dilute HCl. Okay? And we can keep it dilute there, and if we concentrate it here and add some heat, we'll then hydrolyze the ester and get the free thing here. If we stop after just taking off the Bach, which we can do there with the dilute HCl, you see we can maintain the methyl ester. Okay? So if we wanted to stop halfway here, just take off the T-Bach, and then let's put on another amino So let's put on, let's see, how about, Bach protected alanine. So let's make AGG, okay, with alanine on the N-terminus side. So we take our protected glycol, that's a methyl ester, and what? We have DCC here. And then at the end, we would hydrolyze with hydroxide. Okay. And we'd adjust the pH, whatever. So why are we using sodium hydroxide? Well, that will take off the ester there. Oh, sorry, we need to have acid in there first. Okay, dilute acid, and then treat with base, and then we use it. Why? The HCl will take off the Bach that will be on the N-terminus of the alanine first. And then all of these, you know, we don't use too much and let this go with heat because hydroxide and strong acid can begin to what? Hydrolyze amide bonds too. So we're just using a limited amount there. But that shows you how we would make AGG. All right, let's see, the last topic here for the first hour is going back up to the board here, sorry. Yeah, so there's our synthesis of what we've just been talking about on the board with the T-Bach protected thing and the ester here on the right. Let's see some other. Now this graphic, you probably can't see this very well. You'd have to look at this on Learning Suite to see this, but the first amino acid can be put on a polystyrene resin. This is this green part over here. Our first amino acid's in red there, Bach protected, put it on the resin. This is the Merrifield synthesis. Bruce Merrifield won the Nobel Prize in the 60s for making bradykinin in a matter of days instead of years. He showed that you could do it on solid support. And then the product, substrate, is retained on a solid material. You can just use filtration to purify here. And it's only 2 steps to put on the next amino acid. Dilute HCl, and then more DCC. That puts on this blue amino acid. Then you can take it off here, and then take off on the resin there. And there they're using trifluoroacetic acid. You could use hydroxide instead for that sort of stuff. But you can keep doing this before you take it off the resin there. You can take off the T-Bach and add more there. Let's show you here. My graphic here is a little bit better to see how to make this tetrapeptide, right? GEEK. And so we'd start with this protected form of K, which is what? Lysine. There it is. And this is that CBZ. Here's the side chain of lysine. We have to protect that. Why? Because we want the free alpha amine nucleophile, right? That's where the peptide forms. The side chain is just deprotected at the end. And so the next amino acid is right here. This is glutamic acid. And DCCI is DCC. Sometimes they add the I in there for the carbonate imide, whatever. That forms the amide bond. And you see glutamic acid has the benzyl ester protecting group. Its side chain has the carboxylate right there. So there's the ester, there's the CBZ group on there. So yeah, I'm throwing a lot of side chain protecting issues here. Dilute acid will just hydrolyze the T-Bach off here. It leaves the CBZ and the benzyl esters alone. Yeah, if you blast it longer with higher concentration of acid, you begin to hydrolyze those, but you can selectively take off the T-Bach in a matter of minutes. It's a very quick reaction because of the terbutyl carbocation, right? And then that's the free amine there, the alpha position. Put on the next one, DCC couple, take off the protecting group again. And here's protected glycine. I abbreviated that one because you need GEEK, right? And then deprotect with hydrogen and palladium to get the CBZ to come off, the 2 benzyl esters to come off, and the dilute HCl takes off the Bach and the benzyl there. You might need hydroxide. No, the benzyl ester comes off with hydrogen and palladium. You have to get that product there. Anyway, that's how to do solid phase synthesis for that. And let's see, I think we'll stop at this point. So that's our first session here today. Stay tuned for the next session. We'll see you in 10 minutes. Very good.